That was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
You know, when you look at the modern Drag Race seasons, there is so much entertainment that exists within each cast that we get. Since after all, we're getting the best moments out of countless hours of footage that they make while filming their episodes. Yet, you do have to remind yourself that it took a while before the blueprints had been set up by competitors in the past, or what would crash your whole trajectory within seconds. Although, how does Laganja Estranja fit into all this? In March 2022, now exactly 3 years ago, I released a video about the history of Laganja Estranja. But like a lot of my first pieces of content, I didn't have the best sound quality, narration style, and along with that, my research and script writing skills have improved so much that I decided to remake it as a much more thorough, well-presented deep dive that does her career justice. My last video was also watched by Laganja herself, and she even commented on it expressing her gratitude, so I hope that this one also lives up to standard. So let's try to get this to 7,000 likes, since I know for a lot of you, it's these deep dives that you guys look forward to the most. And comment below who you want to be the next queen that gets the Green Gate treatment. But before we start,
are you someone that has an online following or is trying to build one? Well, this video is brought to you by Squarespace, the super easy platform that helps you build a website without the stress. Whether you're a creator, a business owner, or just want to share your work online, Squarespace has everything you need to get your site up and running in no time. You might think that it's hard to make your own website from scratch, but with Squarespace, it doesn't have to be. Their drag and drop builder and sleek professional templates make it simple to create a site that fits your vision. No coding skills required. Pick a design, tweak it to match your style, and you're good to go. Although what really sets Squarespace apart, it's its integration system. Everything you need to run your site is in one place. If you're selling products or services, Squarespace Payments lets you quickly set up a store and offer payment options like Apple Pay, Klarna, and Afterpay. Want to grow your brand? Their SEO tools help your site show up in more searches, bringing in the right people. Ready to take your website to the next level? Click the link in the description, and once you're ready to go, public, get 10% off your first website or domain. Now, let's begin.
When it comes to redemption arcs on Drag Race, one of the more impressive storylines is that of Laganja Estranja. Her trajectory on the series has been encapsulated and celebrated by the fanbase year after year. But it wasn't always like that. There was a lot of pushback that she received for a very long time that sent her into a tailspin, essentially making her afraid of ever wanting to compete again, even if it was on All Stars. Although to us, most people would love the idea of having her back. So then why is there so much conflict towards her not wanting to return? Well, for that, I'm gonna need you to situate yourself a little bit with the context. And imagine it's the year 2014, and season 6 just started airing on Logo TV. Well, even though that was already over 10 years ago, Laganja's reasoning for even getting into drag expanded even further back into the timeline. Around the years 2008-2009, living within the state of Texas, Laganja Estranja was a 20-year-old aspiring dancer, and Alyssa Edwards owned her own dance studio where she provided professional dance classes to young students. Ironically, Laganja worked at a dance studio too, except it wasn't Alyssa's. Instead, she worked as an instructor in a dance studio that was Alyssa's direct competitor. Subsequently, Laganja didn't end up getting rehired at her studio, so she called up Alyssa and said, quote, "Hey, do you want to piss off your competition?" And so Alyssa allowed Laganja to go over to her studio for an audition, pretty much hiring her on the spot. Despite the circumstances, they would end up forming one of the most incredible relationships that Laganja ever had in her life, even shaping her into a much better version of herself. Most of the parents that enrolled their children into Alyssa's studio did not know that Alyssa was also a drag queen that actively competed in several pageants throughout the years. That being said, there was some rumors going around that she was a drag queen, and Laganja ended up getting wind of it, eventually having her curiosity about it all reach a peak and wanting to explore it for herself. In fact, the rest of the studio got confirmation about Alyssa's secret when season 5 started airing in early 2013. But anyways, back around the year 2009-2010, Laganja finally took the dive. allowing her initial interest in drag to finally come to fruition. This was also the beginning of the House of Edwards, one of the most prominent drag houses from recent history. Even after season 6 finished airing, Laganja's relationship with Alyssa only got closer, as they were often touring together. A fun fact being that Laganja was the first queen from her season to get booked outside of the USA, being able to travel to London, Scotland, and Ireland alongside Alyssa. So then, as the whole basis to her backstory, we know that dance and networking to work at Alyssa's studio gave birth to the drag queen of Laganja. Regardless, her life truly was encapsulated by her love for dance, remaining a key part of her identity's core throughout every single stage of her journey. It just evolved differently as time progressed. Watching all of her old performances at bars, Laganja had been doing what would go on to be some of her signature moves years before even getting on the show. I mean, here's a clip from May 2012, even before Alyssa Edwards had gone to film season 5. While watching these old performance videos, I could really see exactly why Laganja fell in love with the art form. Most drag queens have similar reasons to each other for wanting to do drag. For Laganja, it was her interest in dance and choreography that was accentuated by drag because it gave her a platform to showcase her talents and literally always have an audience that would be watching her, as opposed to having to wait to go to some random dance competition or just as a teacher at a dance studio. In the world at large, there's so many people that will give up on their dreams because they just never get to see anything come from it. Even beyond just Laganja's reason for doing drag, there's hundreds if not thousands more like her that experience the same exact circumstances, except a lot of people give up on their dance dreams altogether. For Laganja, drag was just literally a fast way of getting attention, cause I mean, she sort of pertains to that generation of drag queens that was inspired by the rawness of the art form, as opposed to now where it's close to impossible for any new queen to not have been influenced by Rupaul's Drag Race or have that as their main perspective of what success looks like in the industry. As a side note, I also found this video of her wearing the wig that would go on to become part of her infamous stand-up routine on season 6, and little did that wig know it would go on to be flung from the main stage of Rupaul's Drag Race. Although now that we're talking about it, I need to show you this part of Laganja's audition tape when she decided to let production know what her special talents are, and proceeds to give a rundown on every possible word that appears in the dictionary.
Oh girl, hold on. Splits, contortion, dancer trained in ballet, contemporary musical theater, jazz and hip-hop, death drops, toe touch, rapper, actor, professional chain smoker, bedazzler, model, makeup, styling, cinematography, editing, music, film, choreography, social media. Oh girl, I'm really good at Facebook.
It was also no secret within her city that she had been wanting to compete on Drag Race. Even in April of 2013, months before the filming of season 6 started, and also before Laganja found out that she was even cast, there was a performance she did at a club, and the host announces her by saying that she's hoping to get cast on the upcoming season 6 of Rupaul's Drag Race.
Please help me welcome to the stage, vying for a spot on Rupaul's Drag Race season 6. I feel like she's about to turn the party. She is no other than Miss Laganja Estranja.
I really liked finding this because I'm pretty sure that nowadays, queens aren't even allowed to really confirm they auditioned until after the season is officially announced. Instead, queens will usually only say that they auditioned after it becomes clear that production did not choose them for a given year. Regardless, in Laganja's case, her dreams did end up coming true. Season 6 was filmed in the summer of 2013 and would later air in February 2014. It went on to be known as the single best edition of the series ever. Part of it was due to how much variety there was when it came to the queen's personality. Keep in mind that while today there is an added expectation to the caliber of their drag, back then, while we did still pay attention to that, it was to a much smaller degree. Instead, the leading factors for success tended to just be how a queen provided content, even beyond just the weekly challenges. On season 6 episode 1, Laganja makes her debut on Drag Race with the first entrance to truly create a standard for future seasons, along with having a very specific fashion style. Laganja also brought her reality TV persona that consisted of an over-the-top personality, almost cartoonish in nature. I'm not gonna sit here and say that we hadn't gotten people like her in the past, since examples like Tammy Brown or Alyssa Edwards exist, but part of what differentiated Laganja from them is the way it came across much more aggressively. Or maybe that's not the right word, but I guess it was a lot more in your face as a viewer than we were otherwise accustomed to. Subsequently, Laganja's behavior would become a blueprint for queens that entered the workroom in modern seasons, but I'll dive into that later on in this video. Now, typically, filming begins very early in the morning, and for the season 6 queens, the first episode's entrances were shot at 7 a.m., which means queens had to wake up at like 3 or 4 a.m. just to get themselves into drag. In general, this is common practice within the television industry. While episodes are just 1 hour long, or in season 6 case, 40 minutes long, there is so much time that's involved in every single stage. I mean, just as an example, imagine the photo shoot challenge. Well, if we assume that it takes about 10 minutes to get to set and take their pictures, then by the time you get through the 7 queens of the split premiere, it already would take over 1 hour of filming for a day. And that's just the mini challenge. So they have to be super productive. And having an early morning start becomes the norm. Unfortunately, particularly for the premiere episodes, it means that the queens can't just show up to the workroom in their normal clothes. This is their first big introduction to the world. So most of them end up having close to no sleep by staying up all night making sure that every single detail about their look is polished to a T. Well, most of them at least. When Laganja was waiting to do her entrance, she could hear a couple queens talking in the workroom. Yet, there was something else that required her attention, and it was what she would do as soon as she took those first steps into the room. To some, the moon landing of 1867 was the most important achievement to mankind. Yet in the gay world, it's actually Laganja landing her back into the Drag Race workroom. Watching this becomes even more impressive when you hear the details behind it. For instance, prior to actually entering, Laganja told a member from production, quote, "Remember, I'm going to death drop, so make sure that the cameraman knows and gets the full angle, honey." And that they did. What's more is that production urges the queens prior to walking in to do a quote, "big queen entrance," which means to walk into the workroom with a lot of confidence. So, Laganja decided to give the biggest queen entrance that the show had ever seen. Naturally, in terms of first impressions, this was one of the best ways to start off. Unfortunately, it was sort of hard for her to brand herself as well as she did right here. But what exactly caused there to be so many issues? Well, when it came to her personality, not everyone was on board with what they were having to bear witness to. Although, funny enough, Laganja mentions how when she was filming, producers would hype up her behavior, like telling her to repeat certain lines that she said or reinforce some taglines. So it gave her more of a reason to create a more heightened version of how she acted during the season, resulting in her actually getting a lot more comfortable in the set. Yet, while in the behind the scenes production was living for Laganja's antics, for the rest of the cast, it was quite the opposite. And tensions would only start to grow among them, before it all ended up crashing out at the end of Laganja's run. Although, before everything started flying out the window, throughout the course of the competition, there was never a challenge where it looked like she was insecure going into it. If anything, she had such an overwhelming amount of confidence that it came as a shock to her whenever she wasn't praised by the judges in the way she would have wanted to. On episode 1, Laganja wins the mini challenge and gets to choose which theme will be assigned to each of the queens in the room for the sewing challenge. But despite her and Adore already having had a friendship prior to competing together, she didn't give Adore the box she wanted, by instead saying that she didn't even hear Adore saying repeatedly right next to her that she wanted the Golden Girls box, with Laganja giving her the Honey Boo Boo box instead. This was essentially the precedent of how their dynamic was going to be moving forward. While they were friends outside of this, within it, they were competitors, and Laganja specifically was super competitive. From a competition standpoint, Laganja was able to adapt to at least most of the challenges. Even on episode 3, when she was paired with April Carry-On for the acting challenge, her energy was at a 10, with the judges actually somewhat giving her positive critique since they said that April was largely overshadowed by Laganja within the scene. Unfortunately, it seems that in these initial episodes of the season, she just happened to have the bad luck of getting roles where she wasn't able to rise to the occasion, despite having the skills to do so. For instance, in the Rusical challenge from episode 4, had she not gotten the role of being stuck with April and Jocelyn, I could have honestly seen her flourishing in it. Granted, nobody would have touched the door, Courtney and Ben being in the top 3, but maybe she would have had a more memorable showing regardless. Another important component for the progression of Laganja's time in the competition season is that for it being the 6th edition of the main series, we saw at this point that a good amount of the looks queens brought tended to have a degree of polish to them. Laganja spent a lot of money on the outfits she brought to the competition, even being inspired by the fact that after all, she was the drag daughter of one of the most popular pageant queens in USA history. Most of the time she stepped onto the runway, she served something very polished. It's something that's often overlooked about her, that being her drag aesthetics. It goes without saying that if you're someone that hasn't actually watched season 6, then you're aware of Laganja purely because in the Drag Race algorithm of social media, it's the memes, funny moments, and freakouts that people remember and share from her run. Which is valid. I mean, not all queens can be praised for every single one of their talents, and as we know, Laganja had several special talents.
Splits, contortion, dancer trained in ballet, contemporary musical theater, jazz and hip-hop, death drops, toe touch, rapper, actor, professional chain smoker, bedazzler, model, makeup, styling, cinematography, editing, music, film, choreography, social media. Oh girl, I'm really good at Facebook.
Although you can't deny that most of these looks are pretty well executed, even those more on the simpler side. A fun fact is that the butterfly dress she wore for episode 3 was one of Alyssa Edwards' old pageant dresses that Laganja paid a designer to have it recreated. So there was a lineage to the outfit, considering her track mom was so involved with it. Subsequently, her fashion style wasn't specific to just her drag, and also translated when she was out of drag. On season 6 episode 5, she walks into the workroom wearing a pretty peculiar outfit, with what Bianca Del Rio described as a macrame pot holder on her head. By this point, Laganja was deep into her character. Every time she opened her mouth, a tagline would come out of it. Or how when each of the queens were preparing for the challenge, she decided to randomly go under a table so that she could concentrate on the work better. Looking back, it is jarring to see the way Laganja was behaving. But again, it was just her being cartoonish. And it's something that a lot of queens nowadays try to mimic when they get on Drag Race, so that others consider them to be memorable or funny. Since in their minds when they grew up with the show, that was what a lot of viewers considered to be the most beneficial towards remembering or celebrating a queen's run on the show. That being said, episode 5 was the Snatch Game. Laganja decided to play Rachel Zoe, a celebrity who Brad Goreski, one of the main judges on Canada's Drag Race, was her assistant for many years until ultimately having a falling out, becoming his only accomplishment before Canada's Drag Race. With that, Laganja would end up flopping Snatch Game hard and was placed in the bottom 2 against Gia Gunn. Now, Laganja and Gia Gunn's friendship felt at a surface level like just another two best friends having to face off. But when you consider everything else that was going on, it becomes a lot more layered. This was a point in time where Laganja was separated from the outside world and any type of support system, with most of the cast finding her a little bit too overbearing. But throughout the stress of it all, there was one person that had her back, and that was Gia Gunn, who had formed a pretty quick bond with her in the few episodes that they competed together in, with their first interaction being Gia telling Laganja, quote, she was fabulous, which is why they got really close from the get-go. In Untucked, they have a really heartfelt moment where in between the queens walking from Untucked back to the set, Ganja breaks down crying, and Gia comforts her, telling her that she needs to snap out of it, because this is the moment that counts.
This is the moment that counts. I love you, Mama.
I don't know, considering most of the other people in the cast weren't really connecting with them that well during the filming, they sort of only had each other for emotional support, making the face-off in this lip-sync for your life even more emotional. They lip-sync to the song head to toe, and Laganja off the bat steals our attention from her facial expressions, excellent catching of the beats, and the layered performance with peaks and valleys, while Gia ended up being swallowed up, especially after her underwhelming reveal that took way too long to remove. Ultimately, RuPaul announces that Laganja had won the lip sync, but lost her only support system in the process, so she would now be completely on her own. Now, another part of Laganja's storyline during season 6 was the judges telling her that they needed to see more vulnerability. On the exterior, it was evident that she wanted to come across as the super confident, larger-than-life drag queen that was a contender to actually winning the whole thing and earn herself a crown. But on the inside, there was a lot of insecurity that would end up leaking through the persona that she had accentuated for the cameras, ultimately leading to several breakdowns. But if we're being completely fair, well, you could argue that most of her mistakes came from just being young and naive, there was other variables at play too. If you watched season 6, then you'll know Michelle Visage seemed to sort of hate Laganja. I mean, for one of the challenges, Ru ends up announcing Laganja and Adore as the winners of the week. As soon as this happens, not even 5 seconds into both of them celebrating, Laganja says, quote, "I'm shocked." And without missing a beat, Michelle says, "So am I."
Congratulations, you're the winner of this week's challenge.
Oh my god. I'm shocked. So am I. Oh. Push our...
In all the seasons I've ever seen, this is the only time that I saw Michelle actively make a comment while sitting on the judges panel that she did not agree with the decision RuPaul made. I mean, Michelle has even said in several interviews that when Ru announces the winner of the lip syncs for your life, for example, none of the judges in the panel make any comments questioning it, even when they fully disagree. So it was clear that Michelle maybe had a little bone to pick with Laganja, but their little rivalry would eventually reach a resolution. Season 6 was the first season that introduced the web series Watch It Packing. After getting eliminated, Laganja hated Michelle Visage and didn't even want to do the Watch It Packing interview with her, but she decided to do it anyway. So she dressed in all green because she knew that Michelle did not like that color. Once Michelle got to the hotel room, they ended up having a conversation without the cameras rolling. Michelle told Laganja that it's her role to play the mean judge and that she's sorry if she hurt Laganja, but essentially that's show business. This was back when Watch It Packing had just started being a thing, and it would literally just be Michelle and a couple people with a camera that would go into the queen's hotel rooms and have quick conversations about their looks. Regardless, by the time we reached the end of season 6 episode 7, while Laganja wins her first challenge alongside Adore, there ended up being no elimination that week since Ben de la Creme and Darian Lake had their lip sync results in a double shantay. So then, when we get to episode 8, this turns into both the climax and end of Laganja's story that finishes in an absolutely chaotic way. The challenge of the week was that each queen had to do their own stand-up comedy routine in front of an audience comprised of elderly people. Naturally, just like every other challenge, Laganja went into it with a bunch of confidence. Unfortunately, she created a stand-up set that just didn't stack up well against the rest. But what's more is that it ended up being so bad that many ended up considering it to be ironically good. In fact, for a while, it was something that fans would use as a copy pasta, having every sentence of it memorized word for word. Along with that, what had also been reaching a boiling point was her relationship with the other queens, who had began to talk behind her back about how none of them felt that Laganja was truly being genuine with her behavior in front of the cameras. After the judges give out their critiques and the queens go to Untucked, everything began crashing down when Bianca Del Rio decided to confront Laganja in front of the rest of the girls about how in a previous episode, Laganja received a video message from her parents and got upset when Bianca made a snarky joke, saying that while what her parents said to her was lovely, the only thing she disagreed with was that they thought she was gonna win, prompting Laganja to start crying, saying that Bianca was taking a moment away from her. Then suddenly, the other queens start chiming in, each giving their own takes on how they agreed that they aren't buying what Laganja's trying to sell. That's when Laganja has a full-on breakdown, yelling that she hopes she gets sent home so that all the other girls can have a good time and laugh about it, until ultimately getting up and leaving the room altogether, giving us amazing shots such as this one. It's important to note that in terms of Untucked drama, you can't deny that Laganja Estranja is among the peak, especially for this season. I mean, even on the main show, every single episode that she was in the highlights of it would include something related to her storyline to some degree or another. But anyways, once they get back, the bottom ends up being Laganja Estranja with Jocelyn Fox, and they lip sync to Stupid Girls by Pink. One of the first things that drew me to Laganja was seeing her lip sync. For me personally, season 6 was the second season I ever watched, with the first being season 5. Therefore, most of the moves were pretty new to me. Yet seeing how Ganja was able to literally slam her body into the floor and somewhat look like a ragdoll while doing it was so gaggy to me. The sheer shock of it all made it so that it did elevate her presence on the stage. To add on to that, this lip sync she did with Jocelyn would end up becoming one of my personal favorite lip syncs that I'd constantly rewatch, just because it gave me a rush of serotonin whenever I saw it. By the end of it though, RuPaul announced that Jocelyn had won the lip sync, which meant that Laganja Estranja had officially been eliminated from the season, placing 8th. Looking back, Laganja agrees that it was her time to go, since unfortunately, her story had pretty much already played out, saying, quote, "Figured out about my parents, Alyssa, we had highs, lows. I don't know that they felt there was really much more for me." But she also theorizes that her breakdown breakdown during her last episode of Untucked might have turned her a little bit into a liability for them. So to be extra safe, they didn't choose her as the winner of the lip sync. After filming for season 6 had wrapped up, Laganja felt that she had done amazing and that people would love her. She also didn't understand when the queens came for her about not being herself, because she'd been receiving constant praise by production of the show, which led her to believe that she was really being funny and lovable. So the moment in Untucked where the queens confront her was really unexpected and hit her hard. Right after getting eliminated, Laganja decided to go back to Texas because she didn't want people knowing that she got eliminated so early. So she waited for everyone else in the competition to also get eliminated too. What's more is that by the time season 6 was still in the final stages of airing, she had received a lot of backlash from the fan base that got a pretty bad impression of her, finding her to be overtly annoying. Laganja admits that she wasn't expecting the filming of the show to be so intense. She assumed that things would be a lot more laid back. Little did she know, the filming of the series involved putting contestants into a pressure cooker, hence giving good TV. So, upon getting to set, she was stripped from her phone, her friends, and weed. Now, you might have chuckled a little bit at the weed mention, but for the case of Laganja, this was a pretty big factor in her mental well-being. It's even referenced on her stand-up comedy set on episode 8, where she said that weed really does help her calm down. I think we can all agree that if you have an individual that's used to taking a certain substance every day to de-stress, whether it be coffee or cigarettes, if they're all of a sudden stripped away from it cold turkey, it's more often than not that that individual will be a lot more emotional, because their bodies suddenly get stressed for not having a way to release steam. Although Laganja's relationship with weed can be understood better by this response she gave in an interview shortly after the season finished airing. You may find this surprising, but for most of her life, Laganja avoided weed because her grandma had died of smoking. It wasn't until she was dropped while doing a dance piece in college that she ended up being in so much physical pain that her chiropractor suggested she take some. Even though she was hesitant at first, eventually the pain was so unbearable that she just had to try it. And once she did, it completely changed her life. She got off of all the medications she had been taking and improved her life drastically. So when she says that she wasn't able to medicate on the show, based on this added context, it truly brings a lot more validity to the statement, where once she got on season 6, she was sent into a complete emotional spiral. Despite all of this, by the time we get to the season 6 reunion that was filmed around May of 2014, after the airing of most of the season, Laganja said that she doesn't regret the way that she acted on season 6 because she believed in making an entertaining reality TV personality, and she feels she succeeded at that and shouldn't have been shut down for trying to bring energy into the room. Even though Michelle was rolling her eyes in the audience because Laganja doubled down on the way she acted on TV. Yet things didn't really end there, since the finale/reunion decided to provide us with a bonus segment that is, in my opinion, one of the most uncomfortable things that they ever produced. Hear me out. We find out that shortly before season 6 episode 8 aired, featuring Laganja's mental breakdown in Untucked, they brought Adore and Laganja together for an advanced screening of the episode so that they could film their reaction. It was the first time either of them had seen the footage since they filmed it months back. But things took a turn because they both started to cry, with Adore not backing down from what she had said on the episode, along with alluding that despite still having love for Ganja, she heard rumors about her speaking negatively behind her back to other people in the months after they had finished filming, plus accusing Laganja of not having behaved like herself, and Laganja admitting that she was just trying to be funny for the cameras. At the end of it, they decided to continue the conversation privately at a nearby bar, rather than do it for the rest of the world to see. When you really think about it, to be praised in your hometown only to get on the show and suddenly nobody's living for you as much, and even worse, the only other queen you had worked with is doing miles better than you, even though back home she wasn't as celebrated. It really must send your mind into a tailspin where you begin questioning a lot of your own talents because they no longer seem to be given value by the people in the room. Or that despite bringing a pretty high caliber of drag, you'd still come second to someone whose looks weren't anywhere near as polished and came straight out of Party City. All of that being said, while doing research for this video, I found out that she had a series called Laganja Estranja Speaks, and right when the promo dropped, she announced on her YouTube channel and started promoting her website with custom merch. This was a huge surprise for me, since there wasn't a lot of queens ahead of the curve in that way. But unfortunately, going from the start to the end of her season 6 journey, shortly after it was all said and done, and
and the world had bared witness to all of it, Laganja got super depressed because the fanbase didn't like her and considered her to be annoying and fake. All she really wanted was to be known as a fun entertainer, but it all ended up flying back at her. Laganja then spiraled and became an alcoholic, constantly losing more and more things in her life. It wasn't until her addiction took a toll on her as a drag queen and as a dancer that she realized she needed to get help and begin her journey into being sober from alcohol. Yet pretty soon, the general opinion about Laganja would begin to slowly shift. That same year of 2014, Alaska would go on to use Laganja Estranja's character on the Battle of the Seasons tour for her Snatch Game performances, which was spot on. Along with that, she released a parody music video on her YouTube channel where she pretended to be Laganja Estranja walking through nature. Both these videos will be linked in the description. It is a known fact that Laganja has consistently been asked back to All-Stars, as early as All-Stars 3. One of the reasons that's made it difficult for her to not come back onto the show is that there's so many stakes nowadays with going back. Because it could mean the answer to all your prayers, but it could also be a detriment to your career's longevity. Some queens that didn't benefit were Fifi O'Hara, aka Jeremy Carey, or another example being Latrice Royale, who went into All-Stars 4 with a pretty clear track record with the fan base, but after the season, a lot of people didn't like how she came across in the edit. I made this video about it, and you can watch it when you're done this one. While I was putting together this video, I saw a video on Hey Queen's channel where Laganja confirmed that she was supposed to be on All-Stars 4 and even agreed and told production yes. But when she did the psych test, some information came forward that involved her having to divulge information to production, and so she didn't end up competing on All-Stars 4. She would then go on to reject the invitation for All-Stars 5 and for All-Stars 6, but would then get offered a lip-sync assassin spot instead. It's interesting to think about Laganja on All-Stars 4 because I do believe she would have ended up buckling under the pressure. I mean, it was a super star-studded cast to begin with, and since we knew she would have been competing alongside her best friend Gia Gunn, there would have been a lot of really tense moments awaiting for her in the competition. However, it would have also meant a completely different run for Gia Gunn, who went into the competition as a clear villain within the group. The only bad part is that because of that, she didn't have any emotional support in any of the other cast members. So if Laganja had been there, she could have helped Gia's run through All-Stars. And who knows, maybe Laganja would have won the talent show too. Obviously, that's a little bit too much speculation, but knowing that it almost did happen is interesting enough to think about. Although, eventually, we did get to see her again. On All-Star 6 Episode 3, the world got to see the return of Laganja Estranja, along with a lip sync to Physical by Dua Lipa. This moment would end up going viral, and many considered it to be the main highlight of All-Star 6. Laganja feels that her appearance on All-Star 6 was able to put her back on the map, as she felt that since it had been close to 10 years since she competed on Season 6, that she had kind of faded into the background, and perhaps fans weren't as interested in her as they once were. Laganja was super confident going into her lip sync assassin gig on All-Star 6, because it was an appearance based entirely on her talent and nothing else, where she would end up completely bodying the song, and there was no way Trinity K. Bonet, her opponent, ever stood a chance. If you didn't know, she uploaded a video to her YouTube channel preparing for her All-Star 6 lip sync. It shows just how much effort and detail went into this performance. She also confirms that lip sync assassins are told only 2 days prior what the lip sync song will be to make it fair to contestants. Laganja feels that sometimes the financial payoff of being on Drag Race is a double-edged sword. For instance, the fact that a lot of queens don't get a return on investment after spending nearly $25,000 on outfit alone. To put it into perspective, Laganja's lip sync assassin outfit costed a total of $2,300 on just the outfit and hair alone. A fun fact is that after the airing of her lip sync episode for All-Star 6, sales skyrocketed for Laganja's merch, so she was able to make up way more than what she invested into her appearance on the show. Because of this, she now has a special connection to that performance and brings the act on tour with her. If you needed more proof that Laganja is great at producing herself, Laganja told production to get a ladder so that she could change the way the lip sync assassin got introduced. Production actually made an effort to accomplish this entrance. While on the set, she also had an independent conversation about how she felt about competing on the show originally. She feels that her appearance on All-Star 6 helped repair her relationship with the production of Rupaul's Drag Race, and that she did get some closure from it. But she still thinks that she isn't ready to be in a competition again, and that she really wants to come back as a choreographer for the show instead. A fun fact is that Laganja's entrance for her lip sync assassin reveal was originally gonna be done for her All-Stars 4 entrance. On an episode of Katya's old podcast, Laganja talks about how if she ever returned to All-Stars,
All-Stars, she would make sure to top her season 6 entrance, which would have involved entering the workroom by jumping down from the ceiling and landing it into a split. She would then look up at the camera, get up, and leave, not competing on the show. And while that would have been a gag, I think it would have probably been a little bit too shady to make such huge entrance and then decide just not to compete at all. Now, in regards to what it would look like to have Laganja back for All-Stars, Laganja doesn't think that she would get a redemption storyline, and that she'd end up just becoming a crazy girl again, because she'd end up buckling under the pressure and production would have gotten what they wanted, as she knows that she wouldn't be able to undergo that high stress environment, which is a really fair statement to make. Although, what is the closest trajectory of a queen that could be compared to Laganja? Jan would end up having a similar trajectory to Laganja when she competed on season 12. Jan displayed a reality TV persona that consisted of her being super energetic and supportive of everything around her, or as she likes to put, a cheerleader in the room. But the judges would end up critiquing her for not being herself and not being vulnerable enough. This would create a narrative for Jan to always try to prove to the judges that it's actually her real personality. Subsequently, Jan would return a year later for All-Stars 6 and unfortunately got a repeat with the storyline of Jan not being herself. This time, even the queens in the workroom were now giving her the exact same critique. I remember going into All-Stars 6, I thought that Jan was going to get a full redemption storyline, but we didn't see anything different from what she displayed on her original season. Even the episode she won was overshadowed by her lip sync performance, which many considered to be not good. The reason I bring this up is because maybe had Laganja returned to All-Stars, especially early on, like back in All-Stars 3 or All-Stars 4, that potentially she would have had a similar trajectory. I mean, I could have seen that even if she had behaved as a much more mellowed down version of herself, the judges would have ended up saying that she was holding back from being her true self. In a way, her run on season 6 was so chaotic that it would have been really hard for her to not be affected by it while competing on All-Stars, especially with wanting to avoid reliving that whole trauma again. Laganja's story also brings to light the amount of stress that the queens are under when it comes to behaving a certain way so that the fanbase doesn't turn against you. It's really easy to not think that much about Laganja's decision to not want to compete on All-Stars, despite her being one of the most highly requested names by the fanbase for several years. But when you really think about it, most of it stems from the trauma that she experienced from losing control over who she was while on season 6, and dealing with the harsh critiques of the outside world. So to know that people want you to come back and that it could mean a really good boost to your career, yet still coming to the conclusion that the better alternative would be to just not even risk having the same thing that happened the first time happen again, takes a lot of maturity, because it's truly not an easy decision. In the last 6 years, Laganja worked towards building more of a new foundation and way of life. That's when in 2021 she came out as a trans woman. Her journey has been pretty cool to watch, because when she originally shared it with the world, all I could think about was just how much emotional distress she must have been in until ultimately coming to that realization. Because it is not easy when you're struggling with your gender identity. I personally have an older brother who's a trans man, so I've witnessed firsthand the way life can be challenging for the trans community, especially with the wave of transphobia that's going on in mainstream pop culture at the moment. From this point forward, we got introduced to a new Laganja, one that was 100% sure of who she was, the mistakes she had made, and what her new goals would be in her life. Yet in terms of accomplishments, I haven't yet covered everything that's under her name. In 2017, Laganja made her first appearance auditioning for So You Think You Can Dance season 14, where she did it in drag. It was a pretty decent routine she had decided to do, but unsurprisingly, the judges wouldn't approve it to move forward. So the next year in 2018, Laganja decided to audition yet again for season 15. While this time around they did let her last a couple more episodes, getting to the preliminary rounds before the live show, she would unfortunately get eliminated right on the last episode of the Academy section of the competition. Therefore, she didn't make it to the final cast that gets to do the live show. That's important because it's the most highly viewed part of every season. Although in many ways, I do think that So You Think You Can Dance production was simply just not ready for an individual like Laganja. Laganja says that working on So You Think You Can Dance gave her a new perspective on reality TV, because it was based around her talent rather than drama or catchphrases. Yet, the production of So You Think You Can Dance never really fully embraced Laganja, and it seemed that her presence there was counted from the get-go. Here's why. On So You Think You Can Dance season 15, she would end up having to censor her name by calling herself Miss Estranja, because I guess her full name was too much for American audiences to handle. She's credited with being the first contestant to audition in full drag, yet her time there didn't go as she'd hoped for, so
by season 16, she returned as Jay Jackson with the narrative that she didn't need the gimmick of drag to prove herself as a capable dancer. I personally found this a little bit weird. This is just my speculation, but it seems to almost defeat the purpose of the show wanting to gain brownie points for having a drag queen compete on the show, only to have her come back and take away the aspect of her art that she wanted represented as well. Regardless though, Laganja has nothing but positive things to say about her time on So You Think You Can Dance, and has stated that no one forced her to come back and audition as a quote-unquote boy. It was her own decision, and she understood that at the end of the day, that's how show business is, and you have to adapt yourself to thrive in a competition. Ultimately, I'm just happy that she got to live her dream of being on the show of So You Think You Can Dance, even if she didn't make it all that far. Now, as you know, Laganja is super popular for doing the death drop move, but over the past couple years, she's educated her fans over the origin of it. The term death drop is a modern slang made from the original name of the move called a dip, which originates from the ballroom scene. The reason it's important to acknowledge this is because the ballroom culture has largely been ignored by mainstream history. The ballroom era provided a foundation for a lot of gay culture, and as usual, mainstream outlets have taken from the art form without giving it credit. So it's important to acknowledge that the term dip is the origin of the iconic move. But Laganja also points out that the way she does her move is executed through a different technique, which involves a lot more of a focus on lifting one leg into the air and some other minor details. If you didn't know, Laganja also appeared in the closing episode of Queen of Drags, which is a drag queen reality show competition from Germany that's hosted by Heidi Klum. When this series was first announced, it got some flack from people online as Heidi was accused of capitalizing off gay culture without having any knowledge about drag. But according to Laganja, this is not true. Laganja says that Heidi Klum has been a fan of drag for a while and has always supported queer artists. Heidi would end up inviting Laganja to perform in the finale of the first season of Queen of Drags and allowed Laganja to perform her own original song. It was honestly really cool to see Laganja celebrated internationally over 5 years since her original season aired. That being said, Laganja's famous dips have taken a toll on her physically, which has caused her to do it less and less. But unfortunately, the dips is a key part of her brand. So she's had to undergo a lot of medical procedures that were caused by the constant stress her body goes through when she does these moves. But she feels that it's all worthwhile because it's something that brings her so much joy and to her fans as well. As of recently, Laganja helped choreograph Trixie's music video for Hello Hello. Apparently, when she first taught Trixie the choreography for the music video, Trixie said that she wouldn't be able to do it and wanted Laganja to simplify the choreography. But Trixie ended up pulling through and the video turned out amazing. She was also hired to choreograph Katya's music video for Ding Dong. Which brings me to my next point, and it's that another avenue to have Laganja return to the series would be for her to choreograph one of the Rusicals or a girl group performance. They invited Alyssa Edwards to do it on season 10, but ever since then, we haven't really seen them bring back an alumni to coach or mentor, aside from when they have them go around the workroom doing one-on-ones with RuPaul. Laganja, though, is an example of a queen who dealt with the negativity of the fanbase, quickly learning that when it comes to reality TV, you can't predict the way things are going to pan out, both on screen, the edit, and the way you'll end up being received. Although what's probably the more heartfelt aspect of her story is that despite having such a strong distaste towards ever competing on the show again, Laganja has constantly spoken a positive manner about Drag Race. Even with the memes and references people make about her for over a decade, she doesn't get tired of it, since in her own words, she's grateful to even still be remembered with how much the franchise has expanded since her original run. I think that we as an audience should be encouraging World of Wonder to finally just take the leap and have her at least choreograph the next girl group challenge they do for season 18. Nowadays, Laganja is enjoying a healthy balance of staying medicated and taking part in the opportunities that life has to offer. Laganja left behind a blueprint to follow, and it was to take advantage of every single moment the show gives you. Think about your entrance line, have a tagline, be larger than life, command attention, and be vulnerable. But most of all, be memorable in a series that's gonna be remembered for years. Laganja may have been critiqued for her behavior on the show at first, but it didn't take long for fans to fully celebrate the work she had done on season 6. As of right now, she's gonna be appearing on a new drag reality show by a much smaller network called Drag House Rules, where it's a competition with a pretty big cash prize. In it, the queens are living together and each week they'll be voting each other off. So I'm pretty curious to see how it's gonna play out when it comes to the first somewhat of a competition setting she's been thrust into since RuPaul's Drag Race. Although, what are your thoughts when it comes to Laganja Estranja? Did you like her when you first saw her on season 6? Do you think her not returning to All Stars was the right choice? And if you haven't already, why haven't you liked this video yet? Because it helps me out a lot and I put a lot of work into this video. Let me know in the comments. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to click the link in the description to get 10% off your first website or domain. I want to take a moment to thank my 2025 patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, Sari Tish, Natasha De Leon, Las Potitas, Cool Gal Nan, and our newest Pink Squad member, please welcome Jetsam Adams. And in the Green Squad, we have Cayman Rider Furry, or Diesel Placer, depending on the time or day you catch him, Edgar Allan Pup, The Only Sean, IJS, Not a Punch, but a Keek, Jack Beck, Bashir with the good beard, Galeria Gomez, Sarah G, Scarlet Rose, Boiled Peanut, Max Whale, Olivia Marr, and of course, Dea. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description, and I appreciate your support. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, go follow me on Twitter, check out my other videos, and I'll see you guys next time.